And so I'd like to repeat the lecture series that we did last fall. So what that was is we focused on the birds of Orange County. We wanted to reword it just a tiny bit this time into local birds and their travels, because while we do want to focus on Orange County, and I don't want to steal the thunder from future lectures. But the birds which we see now, they're going to Florida, they're going to Colombia, they're going to Brazil, they're going to the Caribbean over the winter. And a lot of the birds which we see in spring are going to Canada and they're going to Maine. And so while it's great to say these are Orange County birds, they don't know borders. And so we decided just to change. Is that in your way? Would the lake be better if I close the window? Good. Anyone else having that issue? You're welcome. Sorry, we had blinding light coming in. So rather than call it the birds of Orange County, we just thought we'll focus on the ones of Orange County, but then we'll also talk about where they go. They are international, many of them. I mean, the yellowlegs, oh, I mean, they spend their summers in the tundra of Canada, but they may go down to the tip of Argentina for winter. I mean, they travel the breadth of two hemispheres. So we thought this would be a better name. So what we'd like to do is just talk about birds in general today and feathers, the types of feathers, structure of feathers, colors, functions there. And next Monday, not meet, given the holiday. So we're going to take a break for the holiday, and then on the 8th, come back for bird evolution and bird anatomy. So how did birds come to be? What makes a bird a bird? Then talk about life histories. I mean, just because, birds, they hatch from eggs, they have all of these stages, and why not pick the bald eagle? So it's so important. Talk about the life of a bald eagle and just kind of as an example of birds in general. And then for a while, hit bird groups one at a time. So talk about waterfowl, diverse aquatic birds, raptors, owls, woodpeckers, different types of songbirds, and then more environmental issues. So that's what we hope to do over the next 15 weeks. And with the town hall, which we've done in the past, where if you have stories, we would love to turn it over for you. Like show pictures of birds that you've seen or hear bird stories that, we share. And we do really have a community. So this is wonderful. Those who are in person, those who are on Zoom, you're welcome to attend either way. But we've met a lot of people on bird walks. So I like to lead bird walks on the first Tuesday of the month at 4 p.m. at 6.5 Station, 10 minutes away, at Audubon Sanctuary. Great to see you. The second Sunday of the month at the Bashakill, which is a wonderful wildlife center. And I'm going to start going into other places too, the Delaware. So if you'd like to get out and do some bird walking, I try to do a bunch. And then whether it be the Orange County Audubon Society has a number of presentations and field trips, but there's the Mearns Bird Club, there's Sullivan County Audubon Society. There's so many bird groups. So when we get together, a lot of us like, oh, I remember you from the last time, or I remember you from the kayak trip, or I remember this, that it's a real community of people, who share your interests. So if this is an interest of yours, I encourage you to maybe, do some of, these events. Okay. So, birds. There are so many reasons to discuss birds. I mean, just from a number standpoint, they outnumber all of the other land vertebrates. So if you take the number of bird species and then the mammals, amphibians, and reptiles, birds beat them. So they are certainly successful in that number. But I think for a lot of us, that's not why we like the birds. I mean, just they're fascinating. Their flight, their color, their behaviors, their songs. I mean, they fill our lives. It's like, oh, it's spring. We hear the birds. That here, and just so many aspects of what they do beautifully, like courtship. That applies to other groups in general. So we're going to study birds. Another reason to study birds is because they're disappearing. All right. In my lifetime, North America has lost over a quarter of its birds. Now, I'm old, but I'm not that old. And for a continent to lose a quarter of its birds in that small space, that's really troubling. And troubling just that alone. But the things that cause these decline, actually, it's accelerating. So climate change accelerating, habitat loss accelerating. When I was born, there were 3.5 billion people on the planet. There are now more than 8. So if my lifetime has seen that decline of birds, starting with 3.5 billion on the planet, we're now going to 8, and we think we're going to add 2 billion more by the end of the century. So this is the time not only to study birds, but to act. So if you're keeping a backyard garden, planting bird-friendly, plants, non-invasives that would help them if you're putting up hummingbird feeders, you're helping because they're really being challenged. And we'll study that throughout the course of these 15 weeks. This is not only the time to look at them, but also, the time to act, to preserve habitat, et cetera. So I'm grateful to you for coming here and to showing this interest. Thank you for those online. If birds are going to stop this decline that they're doing, it'll be, concerted effort of all of us, especially people who feel the way you do. I mean, that's one of the Audubon Society's primary goals. They called it bending the bird curve, because bird numbers are doing this. And we'd like to stop that. We'd like to bend it so the decline stops, or, and levels off would be ideal. So as
Okay.
we then, oh, and then this comes up a lot too. But one of the things we then worry about, so here's, I love birds, and we talk about birds, but we can throw another species here and there. Here's a frog, all right, that species, all right, that's where you find it. All right, so if you want to find this species of frog, it's there and nowhere else in the world. So if that area, they develop the area, they drain swamps, they put up, whatever, this frog only here, this frog only here. And so when we talk about endangered species, and actually there's a bird on the threatened list, the least bittern, that I just saw about a week ago at the sanctuary in Goshen. I take pictures of them, I put them in the Audubon newsletter. If anyone would like that newsletter, just go to the OCAST website and say, please put us on the email list, and you'll get all the pictures of the birds we've seen in the past month. So it's, we have endangered species, valuing Orange County, but so many of them live in such narrow ranges as we will go through. Okay. So the first, the topic of today is feathers. I mean, feathers are one of the defining features of birds. And just, when we think of the beauty of birds, just, the colors and the arrangements, there's so much to them. In the past, I think audience members are a little more interested in the colors of feathers and all the cool things there, rather than the structure. I do want to get into the structures and the different kinds of feathers, but that was a little more from an anatomy class. And so I thought rather than lead with that, I would lead with the color part, because just my experience, I think that's what people are a little, they like a little more. All right. So when I think of color, I'm a vertebrate. So the first thing I think of is melanin. All right. That is the biggest pigment in the vertebrates from fish on up to humans. There are these specialized cells called melanocytes that make this dark pigment, and they inject it into their neighbors. So for example, in my skin, when I get a suntan, what's happening is these cells, which are about 8% of my epidermal cells, they say, hey, we've been exposed to ultraviolet light. I'm going to put out these little extensions and inject melanin in all my neighbors, and that way the whole area starts to look darker. All right. But not only do I do that, fish do that. If you look in fish skin, there's melanocytes everywhere. And birds do that. So melanin is a vertebrate pigment. And when we consider different kinds of melanin, depending on how much you make and its exact amino acid composition, you can get black, you can get brown, you can get gray. All right. And so when we ask, why do feathers have the colors that they do, melanin is a big answer. Even you can make it a little reddish if you want. There are different kinds of melanin. So in humans, there's 2 kinds of melanin. One is more reddish, one is more brown. And if I had a genetic mutation where I couldn't make the brown kind, my hair would be red. All right, so in places like Ireland, this mutation is rather common. So there are different kinds of melanin. So if you were to look at this chipping sparrow, it's making different kinds of melanin, but it also is making the kind that has a little more of the reddish hue in it. Okay, so we're going to talk about all the colors, but we're starting off with melanin. So, there's lots of birds, and the patterns that they have are different shades of brown and gray. So gray catbirds are making a different melanin variant here. If you make a lot of this pigment, you can make black. But if you're reflecting all of these wavelengths, then you make a white pigment. So I would like to now consider white and black before we start getting into all of the colors. All right, so we'll get to all the colors later. So white. There are advantages to having a white pigmentation in certain environments. So for example, white reflects light, so you would cool down, all right, and absorb less heat, all right. And I apologize, I jump around a lot because I'm like, ooh, here's a cool fact, or let's go to that cool fact, and it's here. And I was in the Everglades. I better find it after doing that intro. Oh, yeah, I better find it. There we go. And in different environments, there might be this advantage as far as reflecting light, hiding among the bright light, etc. So if you were to say to go to the Everglades and you said, oh, here's a heron-like bird and it's white, what one is it? Well, in our area, it's a great egret, probably. And actually, there was a great egret that's been hanging around. It was there yesterday at 6.5 station, once again, about 15 minutes away. So if you'd like to see a great egret, just walk the Heritage Trail along the Goshen. So that's beautiful. But if you were to go to Florida, there's a lot of white birds, right? So there are snowy egrets. Here's a little blue heron, and you'll notice it's blue, but when it's young, it's white. So that's a baby blue heron. So they look like the ones you just saw, so you'd have to distinguish between those. Here's a great egret, like the kind that I just mentioned that we have here. But you know what? There's actually a type of great blue heron that's all white. All right. So Florida is the best place to see it. So that is a great blue heron. All right. You can tell by the color of the legs and the overall size. That's not a great egret, but it's an all white variety. Here's a cattle egret. And then you've got white ibises. So some birds or some places you'll find lots and lots of white things. Here's wood storks with all of their white. So clearly that could help you keep cool, which in summer in Florida, right, you can see where that could be an advantage. All right. And there's evidence that birds tend to be lighter in color as the distance of their migratory route increases. Now, I have trouble relating to this because I can't imagine the energy expenditure of flying to, I don't know, Argentina. But you can imagine that that's a lot of effort, and you're exposed to sunlight. So the ones which are flying further and further distances, if the white helps them reflect more sunlight, then this would potentially prevent them from overheating. Birds don't sweat to cool down. They have to cool down using their mouth the way that dogs do. And so if you're going to fly hundreds of miles, obviously at some point, overheating, that's a lot of exertion potentially. Overheating might be a concern. So maybe having more white pigmentation would be an advantage there. What you're about to see, you can't see this now, but hopefully in like 2 months, no, I'm sorry, 3 months, you can see this. These are the snow geese that, often come through our area, and just, as they change their position and you see the beautiful, shifts as they go from the white, we can see these enormous flocks here. They spend much of their year in the tundra. So obviously if you're white in the tundra, one of the advantages is that you can camouflage here. Some of the flycatchers in South America have a lot of white, and just white in general helps heat. That's actually, if you go near bodies of water, like if you go along the Bashik, you'll see a lot of gray birch with its white bark. Why? Well, because in winter, trees drop their leaves. So that's actually dangerous for trees now, because winter days can be pretty warm. If it's the sun's on you, you could heat up, but all of a sudden the sun goes down and it cools down really fast. And that could actually kill the delicate inner bark of a tree that doesn't have thick bark like these birches. So they have white bark to reflect light so they don't heat up quite as fast. Otherwise, that would be dangerous uh, for them. So that's an advantage of having the white pigmentation. For Arctic birds, it helps their camouflage. You would cool down faster. Obviously, polar bears white as well. Okay, so by accumulating the melanin pigments, you could then have black coloration. And so there's, black colors in diverse birds. So black vultures, we have black birds, different kinds, and there's these different ibises. And that would do the opposite. That would then help you absorb heat and potentially warm up faster. I'm sure I'll see this. Yeah, there we go. So here, cormorants, they're spending a lot of time in the water where they'll get like cold and wet, and their feathers are different because their feathers can actually get waterlogged, and they like that because, like you'd think, wouldn't it be cool to be like waterproof like a duck? Well, if you want to float, yes. But if you're diving underwater to eat fish, no. Floating is bad because you're like almost at a fish and then you're like you're floating up. So these birds, their feathers get wet so they can go underwater better. But as a result, they have to dry off better. So you see their color. They're this dark black, and as they spread their wings, that's going to absorb more sunlight so they can then dry off. When you see turkey vultures, very often in the morning, you'll see them spreading their dark wings in the sunlight because they're huge birds, all right, and they need to warm up. And so by spreading these black feathers in the sunlight, that can help them. So that's an advantage. One of the things we notice with black is it often occurs at the wing tips. I mean, look at these white storks. The edges of their wings are black. Look at these gulls. Edges of the wings are black. And one of the things is, one, it makes it stronger, right? So feathers are stronger when they accumulate black pigment. And so having it at the tips, there's an advantage to that. But also, this is really involved. I don't mean to get super involved, but I'll just like tease it. So if you wanted to look it up later, you could. All right, so imagine I'm flying and I'm a bird. All right. If the tip of the wing is black, that means the tip of my wing is hotter than the rest of my wing. And now as I'm flying through the air, this will modify how air goes over my wing. And if I'm a bird, I want to save energy. If I can get a little bit of lift where I can, that works. So actually there's some of that strategizing going on. If the tips of my feathers are darker, how does that affect airflow over my wing? And will that be more efficient? Right. So um, I'm sorry, I just mentioned a second ago that birds don't sweat to cool down, they open their mouths. So here's a hot wood stork in Florida doing just what I said. Um, being dark certainly helps you absorb more heat. But like with dogs, if you're a dark dog on hot summer days, you're going to overheat a little faster than um, than others would. Dark snakes will absorb more energy while basking. Um, I want to leave this because there's all this physics involved. Like if you wanted to read papers on birds, people go really into the thermodynamics with chemical equations, into this. But here's just a crazy thing. If you look closely at like a raven or a crow, you can actually see like whitish feathers, not at the tip, underneath. All right. So here's a crazy thing. If you want to have black feathers, maybe make it black at the end and like white in the middle. So now the very outside of you is hot, because black creating hot. But now you have like cooler air here. And if you have cooler air in the whiter area in the middle, that A makes it easier for heat to leave your body. Because if you were like black all the way down to your skin, all right, now heat's not going to leave your body and go to where it's hot. Heat would only go to where it's cool. So heat would leave a crow better if there was a little bit of white in between. All right, but then also as if the edges of the feathers are really heating up, that's going to now cause the wind can more easily remove heat from your body. So there's all of this just physics going on with heat, etc. Which obviously this is, I apologize, this isn't, I don't think this is Mojave Desert, although it could be. I think this is Joshua Tree. But it's really hot, a hot part of the country. So, if this little modification makes a slight difference in how heat leaves your body, then, then that's a good thing. Okay, so there are advantages to white coloration. There are advantages to black coloration. And then there's a lot of other things. So let's talk about those. So uh, we live in a pigmented world. One of the reasons we live in a pigmented world is because plants want to absorb sunlight. So they have pigmented molecules that absorb this so that they then can use the sun's energy to do photosynthesis. All right. And plants make a variety of different pigments. Some of them are called carotenoids, right? There's over 1,000 kinds of carotenoids. So we get yellows, we get oranges, we get reds. We could get into, like the foliage that we're going to see very soon now. We're going to be looking at not the chlorophyll, the green that plants have, but all of the other pigments that are there all the time, but we just don't know it because it's hidden by the green, called carotenoids. There's a whole bunch of them. I've got videos, just so you know, this is my YouTube channel, Dr. Jan 41. DRJAHN 41. So if you ever see something you're like, oh, I'd like to go back to that carotenoid video, he kind of rushed through it. Then you could do that. So I talk about, fall fall coloration. But let's get back to birds. All right. So if fruits and berries and all these plant parts have carotenoids, birds eat those, all right, as do other animals. And they then have options. What do I do with the carotenoid pigments? Well, they say, well, I just ate it. I could take it into my body. So if you dissect a chicken, as I did, this is a chicken preparing to make the yolk of eggs. And you see how yellow the yolk will be. Is the chicken, does it have a gene to make yellow? No, that's from its yellow food. It ate plants that had carotenoids. And it said, okay, based on that, I can now, have a yellow-orange, pigmentation in this tissue. Fat has a yellowish color because it can store this. So these carotenoids, they can help protect against disease. They're antioxidants. In the light, they serve as the precursor for the molecule that lets us detect both light and colored light. So retinol is derived from this. Okay, so we could go all into these antioxidants, but getting back to birds. So birds eat red, yellow, orange pigments from plants, and they could just excrete it. But sometimes they say, instead of excreting it, why don't I absorb it and put it into the feathers that I'm making? All right. Now, they don't have to do this. And this could be triggered by hormones. So, birds make feathers at different times of year. They can make different kinds of feathers. And they don't always have to make them the same. So say you're a male bird and it's breeding season and you're making testosterone. Testosterone could now change the feathers that you're making so that you start putting more of the carotenoids in the feathers than you would have at another time of the year. That's a gene switch that you can do. So they make reds and oranges and yellows. And so what we're looking at, birds don't make any of those pigments. Birds don't make red. Birds don't make yellow or orange. They eat them. All right. Those are plant pigments that the birds took from their diet and put into their feathers. Right. Now, there's a bunch of reasons for that, and we can talk about, sexual selection and mating, which we will in a second. But one of the things is these males are competing with each other. And they're trying to attract females. And one of the things that they're doing is they're showing the females how healthy they are. Because they're saying, look at me, look how red I am. Look how well I'm eating. If I wasn't eating well, would I be this red? And the females, they got choices. They're like, we got a male over there, a male over there. That one's yellower than that one. That one's redder than that one. Females can now see who's healthier, who's been eating better, and then make their mating choices based on that. So this is kind of advertising how well they've been eating. So that's one of the roles here. Now, there's a sexual selection thing we'll get into, but let's just kind of run through the pigments first. Then we have pinks, all right? Why? Well, because. See all these carotenoids? All right, if you go underwater, there's more. Now, not only do we have different kinds of plants, there's algae. We got all kinds of algae, and algae have all kinds of pigments. So there's all kinds of pigmented algae in the water, just like they're capturing sunlight, just like all of these plants are. The little critters, all right, they eat the pigmented algae. The baby fish eat the little pigmented critters. And the birds eat those. So these birds eat pink stuff that are, they're often pink, or at least they're like a colored molecule that could be converted into pink. They then eat this from their food, either the aquatic invertebrates or the diets. And once again, they have an option. Do I excrete it or do I put it into my feathers? And if you put it into your feathers, once again, it's like, look how pink I am. I would not be this pink if I wasn't eating well. All right. This is from my food. Look how well I'm eating. Look how healthy I am. All right. So when we have these flamingos, the scarlet ibis is coming up. All right. This is how they're getting their pigments. And once again, it's a show of how healthy they are. Here we have the roseate spoonbill, once again, is doing the same thing. So it got its pigments. Okay. Now, somewhere. So before I talk about green and blue, I'm going to make some points of green and blue are different. Green, blue, and iridescent, different from what I just said. So none of the rules apply. And I'm going to say some weird things about green and blue. And I think this video will kind of show, like if you ask, here's a green-winged teal. All right, so you can see the green on the head, but you can see the green on the wings. Basically, what color is its wings? Well, see, it's actually a little bit more complicated than you think. Because green and blues are a different kind of pigment, which are depending on how light is being refracted from this. So here's a green-winged teal, but can you see how that looks aqua? These are the same species. See, that's green. That looks blue. But it isn't blue. And when the bird turns around, it'll look green. And so I was really proud of these pictures that you're about to take. So here's a green-winged teal, right? Green wings. Same bird from a slightly different angle. Looks aqua. Same bird from a slightly different angle. Looks blue. That's the same bird. All right. So green, blue, and iridescent, a little bit different. So let me explain that. And I thought that video was next. Seriously, where's the structural pigment one? Okay. Okay. I apologize. There's one more pigment video hiding here.
The hummingbirds were putting on a show today.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Let me just see if
at least two, maybe more.
Oh, good, good, good.
Those little things are violent.
There's
Yeah, they were
another
a little
video I'd like to.
feisty with one another.
They gotta be like.
Yeah. Okay, Freeman, I'm just going to mute you for a second. We'll find it somewhere. Okay, I'm sorry. I have like 6,000 videos, so I commonly I lose them. I'm like, I made a video. It's here somewhere. So I apologize. Oh, I'll bet it's up here. There we go. I'll bet that's it. All right. So, let's talk about blue, and then I'll end with owls. Blue jays, that's not a blue pigment. And what I mean by that, if you take a cardinal feather and ground it up, you get a red powder. If you take a goldfinch feather and grind it up, you get a yellow powder. If you take a blue jay feather and grind it up, you get brown. Why? Well, because there are yellow molecules. Like you can put them in a t-shirt. Like if you're dyeing a shirt, you can make a yellow shirt by adding yellow dye. You can make an orange shirt by adding orange dye. You can't do that with blue and green. Birds don't make blue and green. What it is they make a multi-layered thing. And so like the feathers themselves can be multi-layered, or this can be at a cell. So that when light bounces off, whatever this is, and this could be at the cellular level, you got light bouncing off the top, you got light bouncing off the middle, and then they interfere with each other to create a new color that wasn't originally there. So like if you look at a soap bubble or like an oil slick, it looks, ooh, it's got all this sheen to it that's got green. There's no green shiny stuff in oil. It's black. But what happens is when sunlight hits different layers of an oil slick or a soap bubble, you get light bouncing off. And if this light wave is interfering with this light wave, some things can cancel each other out. And that's what makes the soap bubbles shiny. And that's what birds are doing here. Birds don't make green feathers in a pigment. They make what are called structurally green. It's the structure of the feather that causes light interference that will give us that that color. If you grind up these feathers, they're not green. You get a brown powder. All right. That's especially true of iridescent. All right. So when we look at iridescent, that's like the soap bubble stuff. Um, that's what's doing that. Now, we'll talk more about those in tropical birds in just a little bit. And there's one more kind of pigment in birds. My liver breaks down my red blood cells, and when it blows up the red blood cells, it makes bile. And bile starts off as like a yellowish, but then it can become a greenish. So bile pigments can have color. Owls do that, but they make that into brown. That gives them some of their brown color. So that's a different way of being brown rather than the melanin I started with. That's from breaking down bile pigments. Okay. So that was some of the main things with color. Now I'd like to add on some more color stuff because color is fun. First off, why do birds look the way they do? I don't want to answer that because it's kind of presumptuous on my part, or like it's kind of egotistical. Guess what? The bird's not doing that for me. All right, like, oh, what do I think about the cardinal looking red? I'll tell you what I think. The cardinal doesn't care. The cardinal cares about the female cardinal and it cares about its predators. It doesn't care about me. And I'm saying that because birds see color differently than me. It doesn't matter how I see the bird. It matters how the birds see the bird. So me being a primate, all right, that means I see colors that say a deer wouldn't. Hunters can wear orange in hunting season, and birds think it's green. Why? Well, because there was once a single gene for green and red opsins on the X chromosome. Primates had an accident where it got duplicated, and then one got specialized for red, one got specialized for green. So primates can tell the difference between red and green that your dog can't and that a deer can't. You get an extra opsin gene, you get more of a greater ability to perceive color, all right? Well, we're impressed that we do better than dogs and deer, but lots of animals do better than us because you didn't have to stop. We have 3. No reason to stop at 3. All right. So birds, most of them, have another one that perceives ultraviolet. A lot of bees do as well. So when I look at a buttercup, it looks yellow. When a bee looks at a buttercup, it looks yellow with blue lines on it. It's seeing colors that I don't. So birds see ultraviolet. So then that raises the question. When I look at a bird, I say, oh, look, it looks like this. Obviously, the male is trying to attract the female this way. The birds might see themselves differently than I do. And once again, it doesn't matter how I see the bird. All right. How do the birds see the bird? All right. So I give some more detail here. All right. But if you like, when light hits birds, in addition to what might look like a yellow bird, there could be other patterns that a bird would detect that you wouldn't, as ultraviolet light bounces off this bird. All right. So to human eyes, only half of birds are dichromatic based on gender. But to birds receiving ultraviolet light, not all do, but most do. Almost all of them are dichromatic. So there are more ways to tell between male and female birds that we don't see. Like some are obvious to us, but then some we say like, oh, I can't tell the difference between males and females, but they can. All right. So once again, I'm just trying to stress, when we talk about bird color, like what do they think of their color? That's what really matters. What do their predators think? And I want to talk about feathers, but just a real quick aside. Birds have more to their bodies, so they don't just have to color their feathers. All right. So what I just said is, so blue-footed boobies, they do that. They can't make blue, but they can take pigments out of the fish they eat. And when they make the skin on their legs, that's where they put those pigments. So some of it's coming from the feet, but then they also structurally arranged it. So 2 things I just said. Some of it's the pigments that they eat, and some of it's the structure. So if I wanted to make those feet not look blue, I could do 2 things. One, I could feed them different fish, and they would have gray colored feet. All right, so if they're not getting the fish with the pigments, that changes the color. Or if you just take their feet, I've been told, and you bruise it gently, like you just kind of rub their skin, it would now look gray because you've changed that structure that would reflect the light, right? Now, this is courtship of the blue-footed boobies. What are they doing? Exactly what I said. Both the males and the females, they have brighter blue feet. They're saying, look at my feet. Look how healthy I am. Like you're potentially seeking a mating partner. All right. Well, you're judging how healthy your prospective mate is. Here, look at me, how healthy I am. Here's my blue feet. Once again, if they were malnourished, where the tissue was damaged, their feet would look grayer. Now, blue-footed boobies, that's one species. There are others. Some have red feet, and some have yellow. So it's not just feathers. It could be feet. But wait, there's more. I just learned this, so I thought this was really cool. Great egrets, I've been looking at like for much of my life. They're white birds. It turns out during mating season, and I usually don't see them in mating season because they usually come here when mating season is done. But in mating season, they make a green patch. All right, you'll see it in a second. All right, I swear, somewhere I got my. Well, that's here, or from the Everglades. Oh, I got better pictures. Oh, there we go. See how green that is? All right. So, once again, this means something to the bird. They only do that in mating season. So being green there is important in communicating to other birds, right? And then other skin patches can have colors. So obviously, if you're a female frigate bird, you fly over the group of males and you're like, am I impressed? All right, once again, they're eating fish. And somewhere, I swear, there we go. All right. So then the males just do this. So now they're pigmenting a patch of their skin, and the females are flying over and they're trying to impress the females to get them to land. So once again, you can put colors in more than your feathers. All right. Common gallinules, which we've had in Goshen for a while now. Notice their forehead. This is like a leathery patch of skin. All right, so this skin helps a couple of things. If you're going to like stick your head and look for like water bugs and things like this, is protecting your forehead. But also then during mating season, this coloration changes. So, you can communicate with pigmented skin and not with feathers. And before we get into the different kinds of feathers and sexual selection, just a couple more here. I mean, you can color lots of things, like eyes. So these are white-eyed vireos. You see why they have their name, all right? We don't really see them as much in our area. We have the most common one is red-eyed vireos. So the eyes are red. You have to kind of catch it in just the right light in order to see it, right? So it looks a little reddish. If the light were brighter, you'd get that. Now, with both the vireos, when you're younger, your eyes are brown. It's only when you're like ready for mating that your eyes turn red. So coloration can vary over the course of your life. And some birds, if you're trying to identify them, like teenagers look different. So if you look at orioles, all right, orioles look different when they're adults than when they're young. Bald eagles, and they can be discussed in 2 weeks. They look different when they're young from when they're adults. So not only can you have male versus female pigmentation, but you can have like teenager versus adult pigmentation. Right? So that's a neat thing. In this area, if you were to go to Goshen up the road, and you were to say, oh, I want to identify wood ducks, like some of you might say, oh, that's easy. Look at the males. It is so easy to identify wood ducks. Am I right? Male, female, that's the easiest thing. And it is in spring and summer. All right. But it's August now. So a lot of males, so this is a female, you can tell by the big white eye. But a lot of males will then lose their bright coloration outside of breeding season. We'll talk about that in a second. But if you're trying to attract females at a time when, you might mate and father another generation of offspring, then being brightly colored, there's an advantage of that. But if mating season is done, the only thing that being brightly colored is doing is telling predators where you are. Why bother? So come autumn, if you say, I'm going to go look at ducks, ducks are so beautiful, not so much now. Warblers, not so much because they're not breeding and they've molted into a type of plumage known as eclipse plumage. So that's a male. Notice it doesn't have the bright colors that it did during breeding season. Come late December, it'll start to get that back and you'll start seeing them because they'll start getting ready for the next breeding cycle. So if you're trying to get really good with bird watching, that's frustrating because not only do you have to sometimes learn like males versus females, you have to learn like males in spring, males in autumn. And by autumn, now you've got the babies. So the ones that hatch this year, they might look different. So juveniles, males and females might look different from adults. And notice, that's a female and a male, the coloration, it's different, but it's subtle. All right. So there's all of these variations with color. Now, the last couple things I'd like to say on, yes. I'm sorry, I got stuck for a second. Let's talk about tanagers and hummingbirds.
Yeah.
Now, tanagers, I hate to say this, scarlet tanagers technically aren't tanagers. We just found out they're really cardinals. So
no.
tanagers, a lot of us even say, even if you think, I love tanagers, maybe not. Maybe you've never seen a tanager unless you've been to like Latin America where they have the most diversity. If you were to look at tanagers, oh, look at them. And you might ask the question, and here's a toucan. Why are tropical birds so colorful? Why are they so bright? Well, let me throw out a couple of things. Is that really colorful? All right, is that really colorful? Because it's green. Like here we have brown sparrows that are blending in with the brown bushes. If you're in the tropics, you got green. So, to us, that's a bright, vibrant color, and it's not like the brown that you would use for camouflage. But if you're surrounded in a green world, green isn't going out of your way to be colorful. It's blending in. All right. So, that's an aspect that, in the tropics, color looks a little different, as you can see here in these parrots, et cetera. Another thing, though, is one of the things. So I always do this, and I apologize. People have seen me before. There's a short list of jokes I have, and you've heard them a couple of times. Some of you are nodding. So one of the jokes is, I asked the question, have you ever had a Monday night after the bird lecture party where you met someone, you decided you'd go out for a drink or maybe dancing? Did you ever say, I'm going to ask this person out, but before you did, you got this close and you said, wait a minute, is this a member of my species? Has anyone ever asked that? Okay. Few, maybe. Okay. But you're laughing because it's a silly question. If someone looks human, they're human. They're your species. But that's because there's no other species that looks like humans alive anymore. There are lots of hummingbirds, not in this part of the world, but in the tropics, there are all of these species of hummingbirds. There are all of these species of tanagers. So here's a question. Who do you have sex with? Now, that sounds like a silly question for us, but there's a lot of wrong choices. If you have sex with the wrong species, you're not going to have young that year. All right, the eggs won't develop, the young won't be healthy if they're closely related. So you have to know who's in my group versus not. Here, there is only one hummingbird, really, maybe a couple of exceptions on rare occasions, but one species of hummingbird that lives east of the Mississippi River. So if you're east of the Mississippi River, there's one species of hummingbird. I went to Ecuador, and there was this roadside stop where we stopped to get some drinks, and there was a little table in the back. They had some hummingbird feeders. I saw 10 species in 15 minutes. So there was one species east of the Mississippi River. You can sit down at a roadside rest stop, 10 species in 15 minutes. So those hummingbirds ask the question, who do I have sex with? Who's my group versus a different hummingbird versus a different tanager? So another reason that you would have bright colors in the tropics is because if you have a much greater diversity of species, that question, who do I have sex with, becomes harder to answer. And if my species has purple around the eye and your species has, this pattern here, that's more important than in an area where there's only one species of hummingbird here. So that was just a little bit on color, and we can get back to that, but at some point we should probably just talk about feathers in general. Now, next week's presentation is on how did birds become, I'm sorry, how did dinosaurs become birds? So, question of feathers comes back, all right, and more of like, where they started. But the point I'd like to make now is there are different kinds of feathers. And that kind of plays into next week because when feathers first appeared in dinosaurs, they couldn't fly. Right? There's different kinds of feathers. They didn't all appear at once. So dinosaurs got the easy feathers first, and then only later did they develop the more complex ones. So this is the fanciest kind of feather, which we saw call a contour feather. It's got this big central shaft called a rachis. And all of these barbs that come off of it, they interlock. All right, so this one, they have all these little tiny hooks, and this one hooks into this one, hooks into this one. And so it forms like this solid structure, all right, called a vein. So these are then called veined feathers. These veins are stiff and now can support the body's weight. We could split them up. Bird watchers can go into great detail on, we call these the primary feathers, the secondary feathers. Here on the wings, we can call it one thing. We can call it another thing on the tail. But I'll just briefly introduce a couple of feathers. As these baby Canada geese show you, that's a different kind of feather, all right? So they have downy feathers. So there are different kinds of feathers. Downy feathers aren't for flight, they're for insulation, keeping warm. And you can tell they're different under a microscope. So there's no central shaft and the barbs coming off, at regular angles and interlock. No, they just all the barbs that'll come off the base and you just make it fluffy. That way they kind of trap air the way
Wait, I couldn't hear you.
Right, forgive me, I'm just going to mute someone. There we go. So that's a different kind of feather, a downy feather, so it looks different under the microscope. All right, notice the barbs don't interlock. But then there are more kinds of feathers still. So this one is called a semi-plume feather. It's kind of halfway in between a downy feather and the other kind. This would occur in some parts of the body. The flightless birds have a little bit more of those. We have plumule feathers. So it just kind of looks like a straight rod here. So notice that doesn't look very feather-like at all. But birds very often use this for sense of touch. Like in the same way I have these hairs, you might say, what are your hairs doing? Like if they were thicker, like a dog, like you'd keep warm, but like, what is this doing? Well, among other things, like if a tick walks on my skin or a mosquito, I feel it, like it's good for sensing. Right? So birds can have these feathers. If you say, what is that feather good for? It's attached to sensory things. And like if something touches it, or if the birds are flying, the wind as it hits that gives them information about wind speed and orientation, which they find very valuable. So once again, just a different kind of feather that's valuable to birds, right? The flightless birds, these are the most primitive birds alive today. Their feathers are a little bit different from the other ones. And then if we decided to go into crazy examples here, obviously like some feathers actually look like eyelashes. All right, so what do feathers do? And a lot of us, think, oh, they fly. Well, certainly some feathers allow that, but birds are warm-blooded as we are. So just as our mammal hair helps keep us warm, feathers like downy feathers in birds can help keep them warm. But just as some of my hairs function as eyelashes, this bird is clearly doing something similar as well. Okay. And, if we were to really get into this, here's a flight feather, and I said it has these veins, but here's just like a cute thing. If you look here at this turkey, there's the vein, the stiff rod going on. But if you notice, here are barbs on this side of the vein, and then here there's barbs here. So here there's barbs, there's barbs. But notice here they're narrow, here they're thick. So this is asymmetrical. All right, you'll see it again in the next one. All right, so here we'll do a red wing hawk thing. Can you see, you got shorter barbs on one side than the other. We associate that with flight. So if you're going to fly, there's just an advantage in having an asymmetrical flight feather. So next week when I talk about dinosaurs, there are some dinosaurs that have flight feathers which are symmetrical, which means they weren't flying, they were just using them for show or for whatever. But once you start seeing them get symmetrical, you're like, you're flying with that, or at least trying. Right. So, as we look at the structure of feathers, all of these little details kind of help. And like I said, there's different kinds of feathers, and we could like look under the microscope. Here you can see all of the interlocking parts under the microscope. Okay, and that's kind of neat. Okay. So feathers are important, but you have to maintain them. So here's a structure that only birds have. So if you watch this pelican, if you go down here to the sanctuary and you look at like the mute swans, we have a family of 3 cygnets this year. They started with 8. 3 are still surviving. Last year they had 6 and only 1 survived, so we're up to 3. But notice what they're doing. They keep putting their nose, all right, at the dorsal part of their tail and then rubbing all over. Why? Because they have a gland here that only birds have. Okay, it's called the preen gland, or the uropygial gland, but we can call it preen gland, that secretes like an oil-like stuff, all right, that they then rub all over their feathers. Now, there's different kinds of glands, so this is the kind here where the whole cells are bursting for the contents if you care. But otherwise, birds spend a lot of their time doing that. But it would vary from bird group to bird group. So like a waterfowl that want their feathers to be waterproof, all right, they're going to do more of that, and their preen oil has more waterproofing. Other bird species, it might have stuff for them for like sexual selection, which helps them attract mates, gender differences between what's put into the preen glands, etc. But also, just as they do this, this is cleaning the feathers, getting the dust off them. And obviously, like if you're going to depend on flying, your feathers are important. So if you can repair them here, that's good. But also here, these flamingos have a little added trick. Some of the pink that they have was from their diet, but a little extra like shiny coat. Like if you wanted to, I don't know, impress a certain someone and you already look good, but like you might go into the bathroom and just like touch up a little bit to just look extra good. That's what they're doing. All right, they're using some of the preen oil components to just touch up their feathers, make them look a little pinker than they already looked, to increase their attractiveness to a potential mate. Okay. And also waterfowl need to do this, but like some birds, they dive, like these pelicans, boobies do, a number of birds do. So you need to touch up your feathers because that damages feathers, going down with that force. So just, maintenance of feathers is going to help their longevity. Now, I mentioned the cormorants we had in our area, but let me just kind of go into an extreme example of flightless cormorants. Because, I think it's easy to say birds fly. That's a good thing. Like some birds think the opposite. Like penguins have lost the ability to fly. So has this flightless cormorant. I mean, look at how puny these feathers are. It's not even trying to fly. Now, they only live in this part of the Galapagos Islands, right? And if you ask why would you lose the ability to fly? Because that's a hindrance. They want to catch fish. And to catch fish, you have to dive and go after them. But if you've got these waterproof flight feathers that are big, they will cause you to float. And that will inhibit your ability to swim underwater. All right. So these birds are not trying to go anywhere. They're going to stay in the Galapagos their whole lives. Right. They want to swim. So actually the reduction of the feathers is what helps them. Turkey vultures, I could show you in a video, but it'd probably take me too long to find it. Like they've lost the feathers on their head. Why would you lose your pretty feathers? Well, because if you're going to be sticking your face into rotting meat all day, if you got feathers, it'd be gross. You'd get sick. All right. So just not having feathers is sometimes an advantage. Females sometimes have a largely featherless patch here known as a brood patch. And if they don't do that genetically, then what they might do is if they're making a nest, they'll, with their mouths, pluck out their feathers to line their nest. And then they have bare skin. Why would you want bare skin? Well, if you want your eggs to develop in like April gets cold. But if you can then put your body and your skin over the egg, you're helping to keep them warm. So feathers are great, but once again, there are scenarios where like in this part of my body at this, part of the season or whatever, maybe, an alternate condition is good as well. Okay. So, birds are wonderful, and we're concerned about their loss, and so we decided last year let's dedicate like a series of lectures to them, and like just try to cover them comprehensively. We're going to do that again this year. Today was just kind of an introduction to birds in general, but then just like the different aspects of feathers. Next week, once again, evolution. What makes a bird? Like, how is bird anatomy different from everybody else? And how did dinosaurs become birds? Then after that, all of these varied topics. I'll take questions in a second, but once again, I'm really thrilled that you are here. Thank you so very much for coming. Hey, because it's great to see you, and many of you I've been seeing you for a while. But also, once again, birds are in trouble. I mean, life in general is in trouble. I'll be dramatic if I can, all right, but I'm not trying to be dramatic here. If you were to rank the worst times to be alive in the past 500 million years as far as mass extinctions, we're currently like tied for number 2 as far as being the worst, as far as the number of species dying out at one time. All right, life in general is in trouble. Birds in general are in trouble. And the only way we, get through this with minimal damage is if people care, people like you, who learn about them and are going to, maybe manage your backyards differently, or there's so many bird clubs and things like that with Audubon and MERNS and the Bashkaleria Association, or environmental centers like Meek. But then also, if this is your interest, one of the great things, and I'm sure a lot of you know this from the walks that we do, like, you have people. You're not the only one who feels this way. And going out on hikes or kayak rides, etc., you meet other people who share this interest of yours. And so I really encourage you to do this. Once again, there's all of these environmental areas here. So if you were to visit one like the Orange County Audubon Society and say, "Ooh, when are your field trips coming up?" They would, Tuesday, September 2nd, I'm going to lead one here. Sunday, September 7th. That's the word party day. Right. But we're doing a whole bunch of them, and other groups do them too. So I'm sure it would be great to see you. But even if you can't make these, just we live in so many areas. Bear Mountain State Park gets more visitors per year than Yosemite. All right. So Orange County is like special. The Appalachian Trail runs through it. We have so much biodiversity. There's so many places to get out and walk. So if this is something that was of interest to you, we're really lucky to live here. I'm sorry, last thing, and I hate, so if anyone's watching from out west or the Caribbean, I'm sorry. I love visiting out west, and I love the Caribbean. But after I'll get to that in a second. After a while, it's a little boring. Like you see great species, you see different species, but you don't see the diversity. Like, seriously, go to the Virgin Islands and you'll love it. But after a while, you're like, I'm bored with the bird. Like, you come back here and there's so many more different kinds. When you go out west, like, it's beautiful out there, but not as diverse. Like, we really live in a special area. So, here the autumn migration is about to start. So if you can get out, I'm sure you'll have a great time. Well, when I went to Ecuador, that's a good question. I think it was spring break 2 years ago. So that was March. The great place in Ecuador, there's a place called Mashpi Lodge. It's near the coast, but it's an area of 10 square miles. I'm answering a question online. It's 10 square miles. They have as many bird species as New York State does, just to show you how, like, the biodiversity there. So when you're close to the tropics, like, that's a cloud forest, time of the year doesn't matter quite as much as it does here. They don't see much of a temperature variation. Great question. Any other questions or points anyone would like to make? Yeah.
I wanted to mention that you start out saying you're skipping next week because it's Labor Day, but next week for the next lecture. So.
Well, I thank you so very much. Yeah, we will not be here for Labor Day. I apologize. In 2 weeks, we'll do bird evolution. Thank you so very much.
How's Hawk Mountain? I need to go there. I haven't been as far as Hawk Mountain.
It's really good. We even have good places in our area, not as good as Hawk Mountain. You might want to investigate times a year because raptor migration occurs over a while. And so some things like Sharpshins, you'll see more of them at this time of year. So like late August, you'll get a slightly different diversity than you would say in late October, et cetera. And they'll have graphs. So like if you go to a bird watching place, but even like going to Hawk Mountain is great, but it's called Sunrise Mountain. If you were to just go into Jersey, yeah, from Milford, there's a place called Sunrise Mountain. I've gone there. It's not as good as Hawk Mountain, but if you just you can park and literally the place where you would look for hawks, like 30 yards, it's not a far walk at all. Then you sit on a rock face and you just watch birds and you're just like, oh, there's a sharpshin, there's a red tail, and different times of the year, like once again, hawk migration occurs over a couple of months. You'll get denser packs. And I wish I was a better birder in this. Like good birders are like, oh, I'm watching the weather because like we just had a storm and it was hot, now it's cold, and that's the time. Like there's the birds are gonna be more common in a certain time. I don't know that as well. But if you call like Sunrise Mountain or you call Hawk Mountain, they would know that. Like, so yeah. Oh, and I apologize. I know people at home, I have to get better at repeating questions. There was a question about going to Hawk Mountain in Pennsylvania, near Reading, as far as what was a good time of the year to do that. So that was the question. I'm sorry.
To follow up to Hawk Mountain is, when there's a north wind blowing
Mhm.
in the fall, is a good time to go, because that, pushing the birds south, and so they're gonna ride that wind.
Yeah, so excellent point. Like wind direction matters as well. If birds are trying to migrate south, so that like if you were saying like I want to go someplace and maximize migration, if the wind's going in a favorable direction, you'll see more birds. Thank you. There was, I think, a chat question or two. Do they use their question? Do they use their do swans use their feet to preen the side of their body? I think it's more the other way, that you not only want to care for your feathers, but also the scales on your feet. So I think they take the oil and they rub it on their scales as well. So I think it goes more that way. Thank you for all of your.
Walter, there's a great hawk watch at Hook Mountain in Upper Nyack.
Okay, Upper Nyack. So I'll repeat what you say, Barbara. So thank you so very much, Lark.
It's called Hook
So there
Mountain.
was another hawk watch at Hawk Mountain near Nyack. I'm sorry,
The Hook Mountain
Hook Mountain. I'm sorry.
in Upper Nyack,
Okay,
right off
upper.
9W.
Okay, so if you wanted to go up 9W to Hook Mountain, there's a hawk watch there. We live along a flyway. Like once again, a lot of people don't have the opportunities to see migrating hawks and eagles the way that we do. So another great thing about this area. Thank you, Barbara, for putting that out.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Thank you so very much for coming, and look forward. I hope you have a wonderful Labor Day. I hope you can get out and see the beautiful birds as they start to migrate through. And if you can make more of the lectures either in person or online, we'd love to have you. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Yeah, the Delaware is neat. We're going to be talking about raptors in upcoming weeks, so we can. It looked like there was some real interest in the raptor migration at the end. That can be touched on in future weeks as well.
Oh, schedule.